always happy to say again the name of the Collaborative Journalism Resource Hub. We launched in late January to continue collaborative journalism work that we started off with the local media project at Solutions Journalism Network. I'm thrilled for you all to be here today for this, what will be a useful and impactful webinar, because a question we at the Hub get asked frequently is, if I'm part of a collaborative that works to raise money locally, and my news organization also raises money locally, whether I'm a for-profit or nonprofit especially, aren't I competing for that money? Am I cannibalizing my funder base? The simplest answer we can give you is no. But there's more to that, and that's why we invited Fraser Nelson today to talk about that. Really excited to have Fraser here to lead this webinar. She's an innovative, optimistic, and highly successful fundraiser, champion of collaboratives and local news. The list of her experience and accolades is long, so I'll just share a little bit about her. She's a co-founder of the National Trust for Local News. She led the transformation of the Salt Lake Tribune from being a for-profit paper to a nonprofit paper, as you may know, the first legacy newspaper in the country to do so. She is an advisor with Press Forward, a consultant with the Knight Foundation, and she's also worked in other kinds of nonprofit sectors as a leader in fundraising and in particular community advocacy. We have left some time today and throughout this webinar and at the end for you to ask questions, so feel free to drop them in the chat. Delaney, my colleague and assistant director at the Hub, will be helping out with that. Also, I want to recognize Liza Gross, who started this collaborative journalism endeavor. She's our senior advisor here at the Hub. But Fraser can share and take questions during her presentation also. So the easiest way to keep informed about the Hub's offerings is to sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter. Delaney is dropping the link to that sign up in the chat. I'm now going to turn it over to Fraser.
Thanks, Amy. Amy and I became friends when we were working at the Tribune together. And so it's been great to see all the work that the collaboratives are doing, and particularly a shout out to the Great Salt Lake Collaborative in Utah, which has really made a tremendous, tremendous difference. So thank you, Heather, and all the hard work. Now, I know raising money, like, is it everybody's just favorite thing? You just wake up in the morning and you're like, I can't wait to raise money. You know, one of the really important things about collaborative fundraising is you're not alone in it. And I think when I first started raising money, I still don't think of myself as much of a fundraiser, but I really hated it. You know, I really was nervous about it. I didn't know how to do it. I thought I'd make a fool of myself. You know, I'd had enough rejection in my life. I didn't need to create it, you know, every turn. And by having a group of colleagues that I raised money with, it really shared the successes and the burdens of it. And so I think that one thing to enter into this conversation, I think we have to enter into the mindset that these are shared objectives that we're trying to create. We all share a passion about our communities and their ability to make good decisions based on good journalism. And there is more than enough money in this world. The rich are getting richer. There's plenty of money. It is there for us. We just have to ask for it. And it's such a difficult hurdle to get over. And then we're asking you to not only get over the hurdle of asking for money and asking for money for yourself, we're now saying, oh, no, you have to ask it for people that you see as potentially competitors. So in this conversation, I really want to disabuse you of the notion that A, you're competitors, and B, really help you see how collaborative fundraising, there's nothing new about it. It has been successful for generations. It's really fundamental to the way people raise money in communities. And it also makes it more fun and easier. So those are all good things. But just remember, there's plenty of money. Money isn't the problem. The problem is making the ask and the argument to the people that have the money. And collaborative fundraising gives you yet another entry point into those conversations. So that's my premise. We can argue about it, but that's where I come from this come from this work. And I've been able to raise a lot of money because I have raised a lot of it in partnership with others. So Delaney, would you mind popping up the slides? And so I can see them too. I don't know how that works, but I guess it's like share your screen or something. Amy can tell you I've never gotten particularly technologically savvy. And since retiring, it's only gotten worse. So we want to just spend some time really exploring how you can work together to fundraise and how it's actually efficient. And I want to spend some time on some models that I've seen around the country that are big and small. And I want to really dive into one here in Utah that I was a part of called And Justice for All that can just give you some really grounding numbers on how successful a project like this can be. So can you just go, Delaney? What should I do? Go next. So this is where, and we're going to talk about some of the hard things. It's not, raising money is not a piece of cake. And raising money, any relationship is not always easy. So, we'll talk about some of the pitfalls too. But next slide. So collaborative fundraising, at its core is two or more people, that want to raise money together. You can do it lots of ways and most
Hey,
successful.
Fraser. Hey, Fraser, can we just take a 2-second break
Sure.
to fix the, sorry about.
Well, I just say that, most successful collaborative fundraising efforts fire on number of guns. So you might want to put in an application together, with another entity. You might want to pull a bunch of groups together for a capital campaign or for some really big money for a new initiative. You might want to just hit up, some individuals collaboratively that you think you're going to be able to, if you come in with more than one person. And then there's actually ways to create shared events that can introduce a topic like the Great Salt Lake to the community where you're not necessarily asking for money, but you're certainly cultivating relationships that can lead to money. And I think one of the really good things about our sector in journalism is that not everybody in a collaborative that's fundraising needs to be nonprofits. So it's helpful to have someone who can take money on behalf of everybody else and distribute it. And that's where things get dicey. And I have to say, of all the collaboratives that I've been a part of fundraising, deciding how to split up the work and the money, just like a relationship, any relationship, is where the rubber hits the road and where things can get difficult. So clarity always is the most important thing. And I'm sitting in on a bunch of press forward conversations right now, and I'm seeing how these very issues are coming forward in press forward, both at the state level and at the national level. But that's an example of foundations coming together to collaboratively fundraise. So it happens at all different levels. Okay, next. And please feel free to answer any questions like, am I going to get press forward money? You can ask me that. I would say, I have no earthly idea. But the benefits of collaborative fundraising are really, really clear. For one thing, most people in the journalism space, and I think we've seen this through the Great Salt Lake Collaborative, but we've certainly seen it in, I see it when I'm looking at applications and talking to people as they come forward with press forward. People don't know the difference between the organizations. They're like, okay, journalism, okay, an issue. They're not necessarily, donors are not thinking, oh, it's this organization and that organization. They like the efficiency of people coming together saying, we care about this and we care about this way to deliver information. So it makes it easier for the donors and it makes it easier for the organizations because you can share a lot of costs. You can reduce duplication of effort. There's nothing worse, and I'm sure you know this as people who probably give away money, when someone comes to you for money and then the thing that is exactly like it comes to you 5 minutes later and asks for $10, and you're like, God, why aren't these people working together? How many animal shelters do we need in this town? Like the basset hounds don't talk to the golden retrievers. I mean, come on. So I think there's a certain sense from donors of like people should be collaborating. And you can also tap into each other's donor base for larger gifts. So when you come together and say, we've got a really great idea, let's, work together on that idea, instead of asking everybody for $5, you can ask them for $100 because you have a collaborative program that you're doing that is more, has higher impact, so you can ask for more money. Now, it freaks people out when you say, I want to share our donor list. So that's one of the things you got to get over. And you might want to just share it on occasion for certain events. And we'll get into details about that. But tapping into each other's donor bases for additional and for larger gifts is really a critical piece of growing your own donor base. People really like collaboration. Donors really like collaboration. It is definitely a trend among younger donors. People who have donor advised funds at community foundations are already thinking kind of community level, so they like collaboration. And it's a way to attract all kinds of donors who don't necessarily care about journalism, but care about the issue that you're covering. And if you're doing a collaborative around it, you can introduce them to the importance of journalism using an issue-based approach. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. And then nothing increases your own, visibility than a big splashy collaborative work. I think that all the organizations that have been involved in the Great Salt Lake Collaborative have increased their their visibility by getting things, getting their names associated with all the cool art projects that are going on and all the cool billboard projects that are going on and all kinds of things. And then you're like, oh, and news is part of that too. I never thought of, Fox News 13 as a particularly cool organization, but now they're associated with other things that make me think about them in a different way. So it increases your visibility, your awareness, your cool factor, and cool factor equals funding. Does that make
Can I
sense
just
to
say,
people?
Fraser, you're exactly right. I'm sorry to interject, but just a Great Salt Lake Collaborative has been so meaningful to KRCL because we're a small community radio station without a capital J journalism. We don't have a newsroom, so to speak. And so, but to have those relationships across format has been amazing. Like we have these local TV news reporters who love to come over here and talk about their reporting with us and give these other different angles and go behind the story. I think that's the other thing. It's not just the donor base. But when you talk about the visibility and awareness piece, it also means that you get some strange bedfellows who suddenly we're all in this
Yeah.
together, and you feel this solidarity that I always think of in my mind, but doesn't necessarily play out in the culture. So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
And it's good, when your newsrooms are, thank you, Gavin, and thank you for KRCL. When your newsrooms are diminishing, right, or they're under attack, or they're, the people that are doing the work are feeling the way we're all feeling, frankly, having a peer group, it's not just money, it's support of all kinds. And so I want you to really think about the pie is big, right? It is not a diminished pie. And the more we create awareness, the more becomes available to us. It's scary when you talk about money and it's scary when you talk about donors because we hoard those. We've been trained to hold on to them. But in reality, the world has shifted and donors are as expansive as really we should be. So just try to keep an abundant mindset. I know it can be hard. I know it was really hard at the Tribune to have an abundant mindset when we were laying people off right and left. It wasn't exactly, easy. But the more we took that approach, the better off we were. Okay, next. If you have a good case for support and you're working with other people, it signals a lot about who you are as an organization. And one thing I think it really signals is that you are trustworthy. If other people who you would think of normally as your, not necessarily adversaries, but certainly people that might be in competition with you, particularly when you're talking about markets and things like that we do in our world, it really says to donors, these people are very trustworthy. They trust each other and we can trust them, and we don't have to worry about whether or not and we're picking a winner. We're basically picking them all. And obviously, you have greater impact. And I've got some slides that will really show you how to address those impact. And I'm glad you're having a webinar on impact. And obviously, you do better work. I mean, when we asked Marcy and her group at Amplify to bring the voices of young Salt Lake Community College people to the pages of the Tribune, those were voices that appealed to donors. They were like, whoa, look at that. That's sort of not traditional stuff for the Salt Lake Tribune. And we could address complicated problems more holistically with a new set of voices, bring people in. So I'm all for it. Next. And anyway, this has been going on since the Dark Ages. I mean, the United Way is a collaborative fundraising organization. It was started in 1887. So there's nothing new about this. It's just that I think in journalism in particular, we got into such a limited mindset around money that we kind of forgot that this is a good thing to do generally. You've learned to do it around your reporting. Let's learn to do it about our money. Okay, next. So if you open your eyes to this, it's like anything else. It's like when you buy a Jeep, you realize everybody drives a Jeep. If you open your eyes to it, you'll see this all over the place. Those giving communities, you probably in your town, you might have a give, the big give. In Utah, we have Live PC, Give PC, days of giving. You've got the whole giving Tuesday thing right after Thanksgiving, that one, where everybody goes online and they all give. This is something that is really happening all around us. And if you pay attention, you'll see it. Philadelphia, I'm glad there's some folks on the call from Philadelphia, because Philadelphia has a couple really successful but small, okay, it doesn't have to be $1 bazillion in 24 hours. You can do an issue-specific fund and keep it real, keep it manageable, keep it attainable. So this Philly Youth Sports Fund is an example of true competitors. There's sports teams that compete against each other all the time on the sports field, but came together to raise money for all of them together because they weren't having much success independently. These are, teams that serve low-income youth, and they don't have a lot of fundraising experience. They found a major sponsor who said, fundraise together, and off they went. So you can do issue specific, which would be a collaborative. You can also take part in all of these days of giving, the Tuesday giving, and if you have a day of giving in your community, and many, many communities do. The other thing that's good about these days of giving is they're often run through the community foundation. So that's a good way to get your foot in the door with them if you're not already on their list. Okay, next. So this is one that's kind of small, this All In for Kids. It's 15 organizations in Philly. They have one foundation that said, we will support you to figure this out. All they do is shared applications. They put in shared applications to different foundations, and they do joint storytelling. So that's the thing that you guys are best at, right? They tell the story of kids and what's been made possible through this collaboration. And it's not a ton of money, but they have reached new foundations they never would have reached. They've gained multi-million-dollar investments where all of them were raising kind of small amounts of money. And I think when I spoke with them, the biggest thing was they really also helped them align some of their programming so they weren't duplicating efforts, and they could actually think regionally instead of their own little silo. All of a sudden they were like, oh, these issues go across all of our entities. So their collaboration has resulted in more than money. It's resulted in better programming for their shared mission. Okay, next. So this is the one, and feel free to answer any questions, by the way, or ask or answer any questions. So this is the one that I started out here in Utah. So I was the executive director of a nonprofit called the Disability Law Center. It was a ragtag group of not very good attorneys that represented people with disabilities in the protection and advocacy system, which, by the way, has just been zeroed out entirely by the Trump administration. And the three organizations that provided civil legal services in Utah were Utah Legal Services, which you all have in your states, Legal Aid Society, which was a longstanding private organization that did primarily domestic violence work, and the Disability Law Center. And we were all trying to raise money. And I had just moved to Utah, didn't know anybody, and we had no private money. We only had federal money. When we started, all three agencies, less than 1% of lawyers gave. And when we combined all the money we had raised from lawyers, it was $75,000. And when we talked to lawyers, they didn't know the difference between one of us and the other. And none of us had fundraising expertise, except the legal services. They had a development person. So we created a model, and we created a new organization, not dissimilar from what you guys are doing, called And Justice for All. And we went hard after law firms. And by creating a fourth nonprofit or a new organization, that's where all the sausage about how to divvy up the money, et cetera, those decisions were made. And we were able to raise our own money ourselves. One of the smartest things we did right away was give away 10% of all the money we raised to other smaller legal service providers. And we actually helped start the Multicultural Legal Center. And we did that so that people wouldn't come after us for taking all the money. So one thing to think about is as you get more successful, how do you grow your collaboration? Or is there a way to support organizations in the community that are issue aligned, but maybe not journalism? Just to show how much you love everybody. And donors loved that. They loved the fact that we were thinking expansively right from the start. Next. So we went from 1% to basically every law firm gives to And Justice for All. It's become part of their budgets. It's become part of the way that they grow the leadership of young lawyers in their firms. It really boosted all of our reputation. We started getting money from the Utah State Legislature. It took away the whole argument of, I can't tell the difference between legal aid and legal services in the law center. All I know is that they take care of poor people's legal problems. And we raised a lot more money from a lot of organizations that had never given to legal services because they found out that what they really cared about was homelessness or poverty alleviation or disability. So it opened up a huge number of foundations that would give money to And Justice for All that wouldn't necessarily give money to any one of our organizations independently. And we were all able to raise more money from foundations and from our existing donors because they were so excited about our collaborative work. That's really important, okay? I want to point to that. There's a foundation in town called the Eccles Foundation. They're like the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval Foundation. You have to get money from them if you want to get money from anybody else. We were all getting little pittances from them. They made a $100,000 matching grant to And Justice for All. It was a 3-to-1 match, so we raised $300,000 to match their $100,000. And then Eccles continued to support beyond that 1 year of matching grant. Our grants from Eccles went to $100,000 a year for each of our organizations, whereas before we were getting like 10, maybe 30. Why? They trusted us. They saw what we were doing at a much deeper level. They liked us. They came to really like our work. And then they funded the Community Legal Center, which was our, at that point we were sharing a checkbook. So we figured we might as well move in together, and we bought a building, and they gave the lead gift for it because they saw how collaboration was making our organization smarter, more efficient, and they understood our work better. Next. So this will just show you. Now, I'm not saying you're replicating this, okay? Because this is 20 years of work. It is a specific cause, legal services. It's a specific group of people who are asking money for, lawyers. So this is not necessarily, completely translatable, okay? But I want you to see that we got to a point where they're pretty much consistently raising $2 million in this other organization, And Justice for All, and that money gets split among the core organizations that started it. it really, really helped the organizations during the recession because they could count on a certain level of income that they themselves were creating, right? We had consistent relationships with people. They were giving to us consistently, and we could count on it. It went down a little bit here and there, but it's got to a point where it's $2 million a year. And you can see that there are bumps when we did capital campaigns. We bought a building in 2002, and we sold that building and bought a new building in 2022, and one of our principals retired, so we raised a bunch of money off of that. I haven't been involved with the organization since 2008 when I left to start the Community Foundation of Utah. So, and they've done a remarkable job, and it's critically important now that legal services and the Disability Law Center are losing their federal funding. If they didn't have this money, they would be really in a bad place. Okay. Next. So the model that they use, and I do think that this is applicable to your journalism collaboratives. They have a volunteer leadership committee. Now, in this case, it's from local law firms, but they have identified individuals who are really committed to this issue of civil legal services, and they help raise the money. They're the ones creating the relationships with foundations, with their own law firms, with individual donors. And, lawyers are kind of peer pressure oriented. They like to look good in front of each other. So they've created this sort of prestige thing that basically you want to be on this advisory committee because it's a feather in your cap. Like, they join the Bar Association and they're on the legal services, they're on the And Justice for All Leadership Committee. But that allowed us to tap into lots of connections because lawyers sit on the boards of foundations. So if you can find people that sit on the boards of your local foundations and you haven't been able to reach into those pockets yet, and give them an ask about helping you forward this issue that you're so concerned about, Great Salt Lake, whatever it is, using the tool of journalism and whatever other tools you have at your disposal, and as wide as your partnership is. And I would certainly encourage your collaborations to go beyond just journalism. You can tap into all kinds of sources of revenue that you otherwise may not be able to. Okay, so you got to find the people that are connected to the money. Ask them to help you. Make sure they understand how innovative you are and how important the issue is. Once we got the leadership committee going, we ended up adding all kinds of activities to raise money from younger people and from people who had less money. So Bar Sharks for Justice is basically a pool tournament for young lawyers, and they always have a ringer. It's actually very funny. People get, they bring in somebody and you're like, you're not a lawyer, and your wallet is like chained to your pants. So, and oh my God, you just ran the table. So it's become this like fun event, and maybe it raises, $1,000, but those people are bought into the issue. So you have to have entry points so that people see this issue and see your work is important. And why did we do this? Well, those three organizations essentially compete for each other, and sometimes they actually represent people that are divorcing each other, right? So there's conflicts even in the legal work they do. But they have a single shared mission, and it's to increase access to justice. Figure out what the fundamental of your shared mission, and you can find all kinds of partners and all kinds of people who want to fund that partnership. Okay? And they've gone from shared fundraising and one shared staff person to now a building, now all kinds of shared opportunities, lots of shared ways of talking about their work. Next. And you can see that their impact is much, much higher than it would be for any one of these organizations. So when you go to their website, you can see how they have started to talk about their work. Well, it's been 20 years, but they talk about their work purely in a shared impact lens. They might pull out a case or two here around storytelling, but they talk about how their work is about everybody who needs legal services in Utah, civil legal services in Utah. And they have a very critical social return on investment measure that talks about every dollar you give saves this much money by keeping people out of jail, keeping them out of becoming homeless, domestic violence numbers, etc. Next. And then you can see their storytelling on their website, and all of the kinds of fundraising storytelling that they do focuses not only on the key organizations that are partners, Disability Law Center, Legal Service, etc., but the last one there is Catholic Community Services. They are not a partner of And Justice for All, but they get money from And Justice for All. So think about how you can, as you're sharing the stories of the success of your work and the importance of your work, how does it impact even those people who aren't part of your collaborative fundraising? That is where you can start really branching out your fundraising. Okay. All of a sudden, Catholic Community Services, oh, the Catholic Church, the Catholic Foundation, right? People who care about refugees, people who care about immigrant rights. All of this stuff starts becoming possible for a group like the Disability Law Center. We didn't do anything having to do with immigration or refugees, but organizations that like immigrants and refugees fund And Justice for All, and we get a third of it. Does that make sense? Is this helpful to people? Amy, do you think this is helpful? I just want to make sure
This is great. This is right on the money. And
Okay,
people, everybody can feel free to drop questions in the chat or come off mute and or raise your hand and ask questions. This doesn't need to be overly formal. Take advantage of Fraser's as she's talking as she's going. So please feel free to do so.
Okay, next. Okay, but it's not unicorns. Okay, this is not easy. The biggest issues that we faced, I don't know, my hand keeps going up, maybe because I'm going like this. The biggest issues we faced were the governance and the legal and the financial issues. To be honest, the myth of how we decided to split the money was the height-weight ratio of the 3 executive directors. Fortunately, I was pregnant at the time, so I could add a couple pounds. It was not an easy discussion. Our boards, our individual boards, were very nervous about this. They thought it should be a simple 30-30 split between the 3 of us, with 10% taken as outside to give away. But to be honest, the Disability Law Center was in a weak position. I was a brand new executive director. We had no history of fundraising whatsoever, and the 2 other organizations at least had tried. So we got less. I know that the directors have gone back over the years and tried to rectify that, but to no avail. So it's really important to think from the beginning about how you're going to share what you get, how you are going to legally run the money, if not everybody's a nonprofit, how you're going to have transparency around money that comes in and money that goes out. There was some worry that by creating a brand new organization called And Justice for all of our individual brands would be diluted. And so, okay, I'm reading this. Yeah. It is really important to continue your own fundraising all along. And one of the best things we did around this issue, Andrew, and thank you for raising it, is we shared our fundraising successes and failures with each other from the start. So if any of us felt like we were losing money because of this, we would be able to share that information with our other partners. And surprisingly, we gained money right from the beginning. All of us were able to access new donors, new foundations, and raise money. And I think that every collaborative that I'm aware of, and the ones that I spoke to prepare for today, said that threatening feeling was the biggest hurdle. Also, the threatening feeling at the board level. The executive directors or the individual organizations might understand that this was going to be helpful, but the board was like, oh my God, if we give away our donor list, we will not grow the pie. the pie grows. There is no evidence that the pie does not grow. But you might want to make sure that as you're growing the pie, you are talking to people you don't otherwise talk to or don't normally talk to. So go to resources, go to places that you have not asked before as a collaborative, and that money can really help. Melanie, sharing donor lists is a big, big hurdle. And so one of the things that we did is we had a third person, Kai Wilson, who was the finance manager of legal services, because none of it, we couldn't afford to hire anybody, go through our donor list and tell us how many were overlapping and pull those out. And tell us how many were not overlapping, which was 90% of them. And then we came up with a list of people that we thought would be good asks that none of us had approached yet. So we started on neutral territory. Then we went to the people who gave to all of us or gave to two or more of us, and we asked them for bigger gifts for the collaborative. Okay. And we told them right from the start, you give me $1,000 a year, don't stop giving me that money. But I'm asking you for $5,000 for this particular thing. So if your answer is no, I'm going to give you the $5,000 and not you, we had the right of refusal. We had the ability to say, and we were very clear with donors, this is a collaborative, this is making us nervous, this is new. I can't afford to lose your $1,000 for the whole. And we discussed that at length as the three directors and as our boards. So come up with rules that guide your behavior about transparency. And we got together after every fundraising campaign and compared those names again and compared those numbers again to make sure that nobody was getting hurt. And honestly, there was never a downside to it. But I have to say, we weren't raising a lot of money at this point. So everything was in addition, right? Everything was a more pie. Okay. Now, how do you suggest navigating this collaborative fundraising? Making sure that you take care of any uneven workload or recognition right from the start. So that's why with legal aid and legal services had a fundraiser. None of us did. Oh no, legal aid had a fundraiser. Legal services and disability law center did not. We helped with some of the money that we raised. We made a commitment to help pay for that staff person. And then we pulled them out into this new organization on Justice for All. We only paid a tiny bit of that, right? Because we were the smallest and we had the least amount of money. So we prorated the costs of this across the organizations, and the organizations that put more in got more money. But over time, it sort of evened out because we were all getting more money. And now Justice for All has its own executive director. It has for about probably 20 years at this point. It's just one person. It's not a huge organization. And the staff time was the executive directors. We went on the asks. We did all the fundraising. And we just decided what was a good use of time, and we based on the share of the revenue. So the people that got the more money were expected to put in more time, and the people that had less money and put in less time. Okay. One of the other big challenges was data sharing. So I'm really excited that you're talking about impact and data, because a lot of these donors were like, prove to me that the impact is bigger. So we had to agree, and of course these were legal services, so that some of this stuff was really confidential. We had to figure out how to code, cases and stuff, especially as, people were sometimes in conflict with each other, like literally like two people getting divorced being represented by one and then the other. So we had to work out a lot of data sharing. The University of Utah actually helped us figure out how to do that. So we brought in data scientists to help us figure it out, because we were the last people who knew how to do stuff like that. And they set up the sheets and stuff to help us really do that. But the biggest question for the board was always, Where's the money going to go and who decides? And honestly, it was a bit of a knockdown, drag out fight. We just had to get in there and work through it. And once we committed to it, we put it in an MOU. We all agreed to it. We agreed to review it regularly as the money came in to make sure that none of us, we were all coming out ahead, significantly ahead. Okay. And we had a poison pill that if anybody decided they couldn't handle it, how we would get out of it. So we had all of those discussions. It's like we wrote a ketubah, like we had a prenup, right? We thought it, of course, there were lawyers too, but we thought through all the things that were going to be difficult and tried to address them. And then we had to just really work together. We had to really work together to get through it. But I think the fact that it's been going on for 25 years shows that it's, okay, next. So, keys to success. Align your vision and your values. Obviously, you're all after the same thing. Regular meetings, defined roles. Like any relationship, bring things up when there are problems. Make sure that the fundamental documents guiding the fundraising are things you all agree to and your board agrees to, and that you understand them. And I think that the whole issue of donor acknowledgement and branding is really important. Everybody knows what the, Save the Great Salt Lake Collaborative is. It's been all over the place. I don't know if everybody knows who's involved, but I think they all think it's a good thing, and you can tag yourself into it and benefit from the positive energy it's getting. But I'm not always sure if the branding is well done. Like, I'm not always sure if I understand, oh, this is a Fox 13. And I don't know if it really matters, but it probably matters to those organizations, right? So try and get that recognition piece. That's where we sometimes fell into trouble, when I thought we deserved more or somebody else thought we deserved more. Next. So who do you ask money from? I think journalism has really fallen into a bad trap of thinking of it as democracy. Democracy and journalism. We all raised a bunch of money saving democracy in the first Trump administration, but we're not doing such a good job with that anymore. People are sort of turned off. Think about what is it that you are actually working on? What is the topic of the collaboration? And then think about who funds those topics. Other places. Who else funds them? Is it the environment? Is it, children? I mean, whatever it is, look at like organizations and who funds them. And that's who you go after. That's your initial group. Right now, I'm working with a theater group here in Utah, and we just lost Sundance, sadly. So we're going after all of that money because it's like they've never funded this group before. It's not really the same kind of organization. It's not a film, but hey, you like movies? You should like us. You like kids? Like us. You like the environment? Like the Great Salt Lake. Doesn't matter. Journalism is sort of, I wouldn't say secondary, but the issue is primary. And that opens up a huge number of potential funders. And then there are people who just fund anything. Have you asked the people that fund everybody? The Eccles Foundation of your town, are they getting, have you gone to them? And I think a great byproduct of Press Forward is getting in front of community foundations. There's a lot of money in community foundations, but they are hard to crack. And because they are increasingly involved in these collaboratives themselves, and it's for journalism, what better place to go than with a collaborative? So I think that's a great place to hit up. But don't think about journalism and don't think about democracy. Think about cats or the environment or whatever it is that you're doing. And that's where you should go first. Okay, next. So I gave you I have a sample MOU that I'm sure Amy will share with you, but it kind of highlights those big decisions. Delaney, I don't know if you want to bring it up or if you guys just want to go through it, but there's places in it where it's like danger Will Rogers, this is a big decision, and don't skimp on those decisions. The more trust you have between the organizations, the easier it will be to fundraise, because you'll go in with a very clear shared purpose to those donors, those foundations, and you'll be able to say, we've worked all these things out. And here, this is what we're doing. This is what we want from you. This is how we're going to share it. This is the impact it will have. This is the commitment our organizations have made to each other. And this is the commitment we want from you to our organizations and our issues. And foundations love that. They love it. And high net worth individuals love it because they don't have to pick. You've made the decision for them. You've got a project that's exciting. You can show impact. You can show trust and affiliation. And they're like, how much can I give you? That's where you want to be. Okay. And I welcome you. Anybody's welcome to call me if you'd like. I put my phone number in the last slide. So, if you need some help brainstorming about who to hit up, feel free to reach out.
There's another question here in the chat, Fraser, and everybody please feel free to come off mute if you want to ask your question directly about your particular collaborative situation. We have Fraser for a little bit more time, so please take advantage of her expertise. Feel free to.
So, Houston's a hard one because you guys just blew through a bunch of money without much result. So I think that, there might be a little hangover from that. What I would do is approach people in Houston who are not journalism funders. So the first thing I would do is look at the list of who was funding journalism in Houston and don't go there. Go to other organizations. That's what I would do. Yes, I would be happy to get you in front of the Eccles Foundation. Fortunately, the new staff person at the Eccles Foundation is the former editor of the Salt Lake Tribune. So I think we're all going to be knocking on her door. So,
Who is that, Fraser?
Jennifer Napier Pierce. But I do think that if you go to the Eccles Foundation for money, just like any other sort of mainstream foundation, the more organizations that you can say are part of your effort, the stronger your application will be. And just think about it from an efficiency point of view on their side. They'd rather get one application from 10 people than 10 applications. It costs them money to run these things. So they're much more likely to fund a collaborative. Those kind of big, boring foundations love collaboratives. Love collaboratives because it's easy. It's a no-brainer. They can check, journalism, issue, whatever, and all the organizations. You've done the hard work for them.
Fraser, what about, I think about the Great Salt Lake Collaborative, and if anybody's wondering why either Fraser or I keep talking about that is because we both live in Salt Lake City. So we're familiar with the work that the Great Salt Lake Collaborative does around the shrinking Great Salt Lake. I know at one point they had a couple of times reached out from Patagonia and from IKEA about supporting the collaborative in different ways based on the work that they were doing. Can you give a little bit of advice about looking beyond like those kinds of funders and because a lot of these big corporations have community funding and community organizations where they're trying to get involved in the community, so they're not just this big international.
Oh yeah, corporations corporations and individuals are overlooked often when it comes to funding. And I'm sorry, thank you, Amy. I'm sorry I focus so much on foundations. High net worth individuals are far less fickle than foundations. Foundations, it's like one day it's AIDS, the next day it's refugees, the next day it's whatever. People who care about cats leave everything they have to cats, right? They get fixated on an issue, and that's the issue they fund, and they do not change. Over time, you can count on an individual donor way more than you can count on a foundation. Corporations fund based on what their employees are interested in. So a lot of times they will survey their employees or they have processes that employees are involved with. American Express is a great example of that. If you have an American Express employee on your board or involved as a volunteer, you automatically get money from American Express. It's not a lot, it's a couple $1,000s, but they come with money. And the corporations, sometimes corporations let their employees lead, and sometimes it's the issue. So IKEA might be, environment, it might be something along those lines. Patagonia, obviously a big environmental funder. So if there's a way for you to think about the issue you're covering and a corporate alignment, that's a way to go. Now, how do you get to these people? The best way to get to them is through their community engagement staff, right? So that's usually the person who, manages their fundraising, and oftentimes is also the person who sort of manages their public relations. I just got $2,500 from a grocery store for my little neighborhood organization because they have a grocery store that's not too far away. And I met with them to say, why don't you open a grocery store in my low income neighborhood? They were like, yeah, you have too many nobody's buying arugula in the ballpark, but here's $2,500 to go away. I was happy to get that. So sometimes you have to think about what is your in with them, but it's often the community relations person. If you can find somebody who works at the corporation that go with them. If it's a local organization. If you go to like the big ones, Target, Walmart, they have a process, a grant making process. But a lot of times with local businesses or even like a Patagonia, they sort of run independently, and you can go to their local chapter and they don't necessarily have to work through their national one. REI is another great place to get easy money fast. But who on your board knows somebody at the corporation? Who do you know at the corporation?
And I think we've also seen opportunity from groups that are technological businesses, because tech is such a big industry in every city. They have a vested interest in whether you're the journalism that the collaboratives do, whether it's affordable housing, whether it's environment, whether it's health, because of the intersection of the tech industry and employee and attracting people living there to the work of the journalism that they were doing.
One argument that I remember having with actually Jennifer Napier Pierce at the Tribune was when we were starting fundraising, she was concerned about, conflicts of interest. So we're covering the so-and-sos, so we can't, blah, blah, blah. Housing was a big issue there because I'm like, we can raise money from developers fairly easily. I know all of them, and and she's like, well, we're covering that issue. Well, the thing is, you take advertising from those places. So you can get through those arguments fairly easily around fundraising, but you might find in a collaborative that somebody's not quite there. Okay. So you might be enlightened as to why, there's no such thing as untainted money and take all the money you can from anybody you can get it from, but your partner may not be. So that's where education and really helping people see the bigger picture. And that may be why going to non-traditional, like, where they haven't gone before makes sense. And in terms of finding rich people, the place you find rich people is at the community foundations. You also find them at donors to other kinds of organizations like arts organizations, where old people are giving away their money. So symphony, opera, arts organizations, et cetera, the university. And you probably know these names. And one of the things that was the most fun about raising money at the Tribune, that was just like, oh my God, it was like stealing money from babies. We had a mailing list, and I could run a zip code and I could look at the streets and say, oh my God, they've been subscribing to the Tribune for 60 years. That means they're close to death. They live in a house. I can Zillow it. It's worth $1 bazillion. Okay, don't steal money from babies. But sometimes you might want to. And I could go literally knock on their door and be like, hey, Fraser Nelson here from the Tribune. I can't help but notice that you're old, rich, and read the Tribune. We're becoming a nonprofit. Would you give me some money? And they were, inevitably, they were like, oh, you guys are taking money now? Okay. I'm like, did you notice you're paying out the wazoo for a print paper that rarely arrives? Give me money. And it was so easy to raise that money. It was so easy. So you have access to names, addresses, information. Use it.
Liza, you came off mute. Did you have a question or something to say? Not quite.
Well, I don't want to get us off track, but I also wanted, Fraser, if you can, thank you very much for this excellent presentation. But also in terms of building capacity, thinking as a collaborative, I found that also has collateral benefit for the individuals. And I will not identify this, but I was talking to a funder who was telling me that one participant in one collaborative had been asking this person for money for years with a very unsophisticated pitch, just give me money because we deserve it. But ever since this person had been a part of the collaborative, the pitch had become individually, not as part of the collaborative, had become much more sophisticated. Clearly, this person had received some coaching, had access to different types of feedback, and that now the funder was much more receptive to listening to this person and giving this person some money individually in addition to the collaborative. So
That's
if you can
great,
talk a
Lemon.
little bit about the individual benefits as well, beyond.
I mean, I think we all work better when we have trusted, supportive relationships that are honest with people that we're all trying to do the same thing. In Injustice for All, I was good at certain things. Ann Milne, who'd been a lawyer in Utah forever, hated raising money, but knew the backstory on every single lawyer in the state, who'd been married to who'd gotten this, who had done that. And between all of us, we could really decide what our strengths were, deploy them to great effect. And then Ann became an excellent fundraiser. She would throw, literally, I mean, she'd kill me if I said this, but she would literally throw up in the parking lot before we went to do an ask. And by the end, I mean, we would bring like baby wipes. I mean, she was counted on. She would be so nervous. And by the end, she's like really a good fundraiser. So we all upped our skill set. And that paid off for our individual organizations. I think the place where it paid off the most was I was very active in the legislature as a lobbyist, and they were terrified about going for state funding, absolutely terrified. And Justice for All is now in the general budget every year because, and legal services and legal aid are going to go to the legislature this year, particularly legal services and the Disability Law Center, because it's getting zeroed out by Trump. And they have those relationships that will allow them to raise money for their own organizations, potentially from the legislature, because they've got years of experience. So I think that these collaboratives are really a way to up everybody's game individually and collectively. I absolutely believe it. And I would not be telling you this if I hadn't seen it in my own eyes, in my own life. It really does work. It really does work. And that's why the United Way and all those other organizations, Giving Tuesday and the rest, that's why they exist, because it works. You just have to be really honest and really clear about all these nitty-gritty issues that you'll see in the MOU. Don't skimp on that stuff, right?
We will
Don't
share that MOU.
engage to somebody before you say, do you want to have children? You got to get these things out of the way early.
We will share that sample MOU when we send out a follow-up email after this. Any last questions before we wrap this up for Fraser? If not, Fraser has generously shared her contact information, which we will share it'll be in the slides, but also in the follow-up email along with the recorded webinar of this. We will eventually make this available, but for now, this is for you, the people who we work with, the people we support in all ways, from the beginning to the end, re-engaging, helping people start, launch collaboration. Please reach out to the Resource Hub. We continue our work. We're evangelists for collaborative journalism, and we want to help in any way we can, no matter where you are in your collaborative journey. And again, please take advantage of Fraser's excellent, as an excellent resource. And we will see you all soon.
Thanks for your work, you guys. We really need you in this world. I'm so grateful for the work you do every day. Thank you.